Compositional Semantics. What else we talk about when we talk about meaning? Part 1, terminology. So the first term that we need to get straight is proposition. This is the object of study when it comes to compositional semantics. In the same way that when we talk about syntax, the object of study is the sentence. And in fact, the proposition corresponds loosely to a syntactic sentence. A proposition has a truth value. In other words, every proposition is either true or false. So a proposition's reference is either true or false. So we talked about the difference between reference and sense in an earlier video when we were talking about lexical semantics. And a proposition also has truth conditions, which is its sense. So a proposition's sense is the truth conditions that allow a speaker to determine its truth value. So just as the sense of a word is how we arrive at its reference, the sense of a proposition is how we arrive at its truth value. The truth conditions are derived from the sense and reference of a proposition's component parts. A proposition has two daughters, an argument and a predicate. Again, this is fairly similar to what we say about a sentence, that a sentence consists of a noun phrase and a verb phrase. So the argument, to start with, this is the corresponding element in semantics to a syntactic noun phrase. An argument's reference is typically an entity, and something that exists out there in the real world. An argument's sense is how we identify its reference. An argument's reference contributes to the truth conditions of whatever proposition the argument is a part of. The predicate corresponds to a verb, an adjective, or a noun. So a predicate, most of the time I think we think of it corresponding to a verb, but it can also be related to an adjective, and surprisingly to a lot of people, it also can correspond to a noun. A predicate's reference is a set of entities. So remember, an argument is typically an entity, a predicate is a set of entities. A predicate's sense is how we identify its reference, it's how we get at that set. And a predicate's reference contributes to the truth conditions of whatever proposition the predicate is a part of. In our earlier tree, we associated a predicate with a VP, but strictly speaking, this is a one-place predicate. That is to say, it has exactly one argument. But in traditional logic, there can be any number of arguments for a given predicate. So there can be a one-place, a two-place, a three-place, or four-place predicate. In other words, that's the number of arguments that it can take. In linguistics, since we're interested in natural languages, what we find is that there are only three possibilities. There are one-place predicates, two-place predicates, and three-place predicates. So a one-place predicate corresponds typically to an intransitive verb or to an adjective. A two-place predicate is usually going to correspond to a transitive verb, and a three-place predicate to a ditransitive verb. In traditional logic, arguments are ordered linearly, but not hierarchically. So for example, you get this expression F parentheses A comma B parentheses. The syntax of logic like that is a purely linear syntax, where in this case, F is a two-place predicate and A and B are its arguments. But in semantics, we assume that it's going to correspond fairly similarly to a syntactic tree. There's a hierarchical structure to propositions. And I've already kind of argued that. So a one-place predicate can be derived from a two-place predicate by combining it with one of its arguments, similarly to how we would see a transitive verb combining with its complement noun phrase object. We see a two-place predicate combining with an argument to create a one-place predicate that then combines with another argument to form a proposition. A proposition has two daughters, an argument and a one-place predicate, just like we saw with sentences where we've got a noun phrase subject and a verb phrase predicate. Recall that an argument refers to an entity and a predicate refers to a set of entities. What that means for us is it gives us an idea of then how we arrive at the truth value of a proposition. A proposition is true if and only if the reference of its argument is a member of the reference set of its predicate. So let me give you an example of how this would work. Let's take two propositions. One is Elsa is blonde, and the other is Anna is blonde. All right? Very similar structures. The only difference is in the argument. So now let's assume a universe where there's only 8 individuals. Right? So you see the pictures of those 8 individuals here. And obviously, when we're talking about the real world, we're looking at a much bigger universe of discourse. But this just makes it simpler to assume a very small universe. Okay, now, first of all, we need to figure out the reference for our two arguments. So Elsa is that woman on the top left corner, and Anna is the woman right below her. Okay. Now we need to establish the reference set for blonde. And the reference set is going to be all those individuals in our universe who are blonde. And what that means for us then in terms of the truth value of Elsa is blonde versus Anna is blonde is when we say Elsa is blonde, we're saying that Elsa is a member of the set, the reference set of blonde. And sure enough, we find Elsa in that reference set. When we say Anna is blonde, we're saying that Anna is a member of that reference set. That one turns out to be false. So Elsa is blonde, true. Anna is blonde, false.